All right, what is up, folks? Welcome back to another episode of the Help Me Understand podcast. I'm your host, JK, and we are kicking off episode number 174 of Help Me Understand. Before getting into today's episode to talk about 3 questions that nobody asked me, I want to take a moment, as always, to say thank you for choosing to press play on Help Me Understand. You have no shortage of podcasts and other types of content that you can consume. So I truly never take it for granted that you chose, for some reason, to press play on Help Me Understand. So with that, let's go ahead and get into today's episode. Let me give you a little bit of context on where the inspiration is coming from for today's episode. I'm actually really looking forward to doing this particular one. Not that I have any episodes at this point after 173 other episodes that I have not looked forward to doing. However, this particular one, I think I don't know. I think it's going to be fun. So very often you will hear or see or watch, whatever you want to use, content creators say, a few people have asked me about this particular product, or I've had a few people ask me this question about exercise. And in reality, many times, maybe 3 people have asked them the question, or in fact, in some cases, and I know this to be true with a few folks who I have been acquainted with in the past, that really nobody asked them the question. They were just looking for some ideas, some way to get the content out, and wanted to kind of make it seem like maybe they had an audience that was asking these particular questions. And that was something that at one point I kind of let that irk me, because I'm sitting here like, man, I've got like maybe 2 questions that are coming into my DMs, and they seem to have this steady stream of questions. And then when I would reach out to them, they're like, nah, to be quite honest with you, I just kind of made that up. I just needed something to talk about. So I'm going to flip the script, and I'm going to be very transparent with you in saying that nobody directly asked me these particular questions. It's pretty much just me sharing my opinion, my answer, my perspective on questions and or statements that I've seen specifically on threads. So because I do enjoy a good basic structure, this is the alliteration also works for me too. So this is 3 things from threads that nobody asked me about specifically. And also, I'm going to go ahead and just give my opinion, give my perspective. This does somewhat fly in the face of a philosophy that was handed down to me from my dad many, many, many years ago, like decades ago, with the understanding that not everything needs my opinion or my comment. And he even had passed down this phrase that was given to him, like passed down to him at some point during his development in the corporate world. He spent decades working in the Fortune, I would say they were probably in the Fortune 100 at some point world. And it was the idea or this phrase where it says, that's an opinion, that's a matter of which my opinion is not needed. Something along those lines. And it's something that sticks with me to this day, because there are times where there are particular things that are going on and it's just not worth my mental energy or my time to get into. And also, I still have an opinion and I have a perspective. And with the population that I work with quite often in the fitness and health space, the feedback that I will get is that they do find it helpful to hear my perspective on particular things. So most of these, I've got 3 things that I picked out. So these can pretty much be related to the fitness / health and wellness realm at this point. So let's stop delaying and let's go ahead and get into it. So I've got 3 posts that I picked out, and I'm just going to riff on each of those, and then we're gonna call it an episode. Let's see. I'll go in the order of number of comments that the post gets. So we'll start with the lowest number of comments and then the highest number of comments. So I've got 3 posts. So the first one got 50 comments, and the person that posted the post, her name is Pam. She goes by Pam Greshak _fitness. And if I remember correctly, and I apologize if I'm pronouncing her last name wrong, I believe she was a guest on the podcast with Jimmy and Aram, who goes by 4 Weeks to the Beach on Instagram, and Jimmy goes by Jimmy Nutrition. Jimmy's actually a friend of mine, and then Aram I am acquainted with because he runs the best coaching conference in the world, the Real Coaches Summit. And I'm not just saying that. The Real Coaches Summit, which is actually going to be in Vegas coming up in March. I believe it's March of 2025. Anyways, I believe that she was a guest on that particular podcast. So maybe that's how her stuff has showed up in my Threads feed. So what she posted was, she said, as a fitness coach, I'd like to know how to shift people from desiring a look to desiring health. It's disheartening the amount of people willing to do anything at all costs to achieve a look. So I replied, I believe this happens one person at a time by shifting the conversations that start with looks towards health. Basically, regardless of where the convo starts, continually steer in the direction you want it to go. So not all of the responses or the posts that I'm going to bring to this particular episode, and we may turn this into a weekly series. Who knows? Like, let me know if you kind of like stuff like this. Not all of them are going to be, shocking and controversial. Kind of crazy, though, that out of the three that I'm going to share, this probably is one of the more insightful and really like one of the ones I vibe with the most in a supportive and positive way. And it's also the one that got like the least number of comments, got like 50 comments. I fully agree with this desire to really start shifting the overall narrative from being so driven by the aesthetic towards more of being driven to getting into fitness and focusing on fitness and workouts and exercise and building muscle from the standpoint of what it can do for your health. I've thought about this recently as my co-host on Lifting, Running, and Living with Kelly and JK, my co-host Kelly, probably couldn't have guessed that from the name of the podcast, and I not too long ago did an episode around building muscle and strength as you get up in age. It's something that I will have conversations with multiple people about all the time. And when I say all the time, I say multiple times a month. I'm having that conversation, especially as somebody like myself who works inside of a gym and also works online. I have clients at right now, I believe, like my oldest client is in their early 60s, if I remember correctly. So I work with people at a lot of different ranges. And something that I think about is this is going to sound kind of morbid to some, and I get it. Just thinking about when someone is really to the point where they're in their 70s, 80s, blessed enough to hit their 90s. I think about my grandfather who lived until he was 101 years old. As I think about those things, I think about what is most beneficial from a health standpoint in the age range of, let's say, 60 plus. So let me go 60 plus. I think about what is going to be of the most benefit, a focus on lowering body fat or a focus on building and maintaining muscle. Like, which of those two things is something that is going to be the most beneficial? And my strong perspective and my strong opinion is that muscle will be more beneficial as we continue to age than focusing on lowering body fat. If you just took that particular statement to mean that I don't care about high levels of body fat, then you definitely, like, that point flew over your head like a 747. So I just think about this post that I totally agree with, where, just expressing that feeling of, man, it would be so cool if we could shift the majority of the focus and the thing that people are really chasing after to be from the inside out, like fixing the inside, prior to letting the main driver be the aesthetic. And in many of the transformations that I've been a part of as a coach, the ones that have happened and stuck, so a full transformation, not a momentary got a particular result and then reverted to previous conditions, whatever the case may be, those folks at some point put a lot more stock into how they were feeling and how they were performing, like their internals, than they did with their aesthetics. And then the crazy part was they started to achieve and exceed their aesthetic expectations as they really shifted the majority of the gauge of whether I'm doing well or not doing well to be from the inside out versus always letting the aesthetic be the main driver. So really, really dig this particular post that I saw on Threads. All right, so that's number 1 out of the 3. The second one was posted by, let's see, he goes by Jordan_barbell medicine. And he said, anyone else think it's weird if a man only works with women? Generally speaking, women don't need special training or nutrition interventions, so this faux specialization seems silly. So this one got 107 comments. My comment was asking, do you have the same, I just said same energy for a woman who only works with men, ? And his response was similarly skeptical of their knowledge base, but no concerns over them being a creep on top of that. So yes and no. I just responded with that one, like, so that's a no then with the smiley face, because that's basically a no. So if it's like yes and no, no, we don't have the same energy. I will say I am fully aware of the importance that folks will place, coaches, let's say coaches, because that's who I'm talking to here on this particular post. I'm very, very well aware of the desire to increase engagement by making posts that can be seen as polarizing. I don't necessarily think that every polarizing post is in bad faith or anything like that. These days, a lot of it is called like rage bait. So you're just trying to like piss people off just for the point of it adds more engagement to your page. So you get more eyes on your page. Like this is the whole game that's played. And I totally get it. And that's why I don't necessarily respond to every post. There's just certain ones that this might be interesting to kind of get a little back and forth, see where this person is coming from, like that sort of a thing. So in this particular one, I believe, based on the comments that I also saw on this particular post, that the intention, from what I can tell, the intention was really to target basically dudes like Brett Contreras, who specifically, I don't know if he's advertised that he only works with women. In fact, I'm pretty sure that he doesn't only work with women. However, if you were to go to his Instagram page, and I don't currently follow him, I think that he's actually got like an immense amount of really, really solid content when it comes to building glutes, lower body for females, like just overall training. Like the dude definitely knows what he's talking about and definitely knows what he's doing. Generally, I think that where it starts to get messy is when he's getting into like back and forths about like EMG and all these different things when it comes to like what's the most or least effective exercises for glutes and like that sort of stuff. Like that's where you can basically like kind of miss me with all that. I will say overall though, being able to work with folks who have done his programming in the past and then shifted to mine and then working with those people. So being able to see some of the results that they've gotten and also looking at the programming itself, because from time to time he'll post some of his programming. I believe I've seen back in the day, I used to see it show up on Pinterest and things like that. The programming is actually pretty legit, but that's not the point. The point is, I think in this particular post, when you're calling out like, hey, I think it's weird when a man only works with women, the intention, from what I can tell, is to call into play like these dudes like Brett Contreras and potentially others who advertise that they only work with women and that they're a specific specialist in working with only women. And it is linked, it's partnered up with like over sexualized images on their social media. I think from my perspective, like I believe that is the group that he's targeting. Now, as someone who is acquainted with a couple of guys specifically who do only work with women, I have a very different perspective on this. So I've got two guys that I know who, to my knowledge, only work with women. And they've both actually been podcast guests on Help Me Understand. One of them is Mark. He goes by Training Strong Women. And then the other one is Ren Jones. He goes by Fitness Jones Training. He's also, I believe, still linked with the Online Trainer Academy. Both of those guys only work with women. Now the difference is they're not their niche, I guess you would call it, or their target of only working with women is not also then paired with an over sexualized social media presence. In fact, both of these dudes are like the exact opposite. And when you take the time to dig a bit more into asking a particular individual why they only work with a specific a specific demographic or gender or race, even like whatever it may be, it's helpful to basically say, well, can you help me understand why you focus on working with only that particular group? And if you've listened to the Help Me Understand podcast, or if you go back to those particular episodes, you will hear me ask that particular question. I know specifically for Ren, and I will speak just from my perspective on what I remember with him talking about that, because I don't want to speak for either of these guys. So from my perspective, how I would explain it, Ren specifically works with women because he is bound and determined to be the trainer that his mom needed and never had. So that I'm just going to leave that at that because he has a very powerful message. So when you have these posts, and maybe it was posted primarily to, kind of rev up some engagement, and also there's some truth to that person's belief, all good, like that's fine. It's just also understanding that those blanket statements and those generalizations, even they're being made as blanket statements and generalizations, even though they're referring to a specific type of man who only trains women. And I've actually gotten this question even recently. I was asked this question by another coach who was working with somebody, and they said that their husband was asking, hey, does JK work with men also? And yeah, I don't only work with men or only work with women. I work with both. I work with primarily whoever is interested, as long as it's going to be a good fit and I'm going to be the right person for that individual. So I work with more of a specific psychographic, so a particular profile, the types of goals that people have and how they want to go about doing them. Like that, I'm much more interested in that than I am whether you are like male, female, whatever. That actually hasn't driven anything. What I have found is it just happens that over the almost decade that I've been in the training space, the majority of my clientele has been female. However, I definitely don't advertise that I only work with only women or only men or anything like that. So I just think when it comes to a post like this with underneath the heading of like, question that nobody asked me, if somebody were to ask me like, hey, what do you think about, do you think it's weird if a man only works with women? No, I don't. What I do think is potentially creepy is if a man or if a woman, so either or, I think if you have someone who works with specific people and also pairs that with a ton of like over sexualization, and also pairs that, this is the part I didn't necessarily dig as much into, and also pairs that with really overhyping what the training differences are between, if we're talking like men and women here. I think when you're overhyping things like that, then that's where I believe it tends to be, let's say, problematic. I even this morning was going through a couple of things with some content, going back to look at some photos that I could use for content, things that I had screenshot. And I had screenshot like quite a while ago, this thing that I was going to do some content around from this program it said something like 4 things that women 5'8" and under should be doing to lose fat. And all of the things that they listed were things that I was struggling to figure out why they were things that women under 5'8" should do, because I'm a dude who's 6'2". I'm actually 6'1 3/4", but I call it 6'2". And they were all things that I do, and not even specifically to lose fat. It was things like follow a progressive overload program, so a training program that puts you in a position to experience progressive overload, get in X number of steps per day, so focus on low intensity movement. It was just like all this stuff, and it's like, this is for women 5'8". So I think that sometimes when you have anybody who is specifically targeting a particular demographic and then really overhyping the quote unquote specialization, yeah, I do think that that's problematic. I don't know that I would say creepy. I think the creepy aspect comes in when you do like the over sexualization stuff. So that's my response to that question that nobody asked me. All right. And then the last one, this one was posted by, what is this name? It's me, Quesadilla Queen. This is the first time that I'd actually looked at the username. So yeah, there we go. I don't know. I also don't know. I know for the first two, they're like actual real profiles. This particular one, I don't know if this is a real person or not. So the post asks, how do you politely, in capitals, how do you politely tell someone they're overweight? Now, this particular post had 4,300 comments as of when I looked back on it today. And this is recording and being released on December 26th. So as of right now, it had 1,300 comments and also a decent amount, or I've seen a few people repost it in their feed and then have comments and things like that. So the question is, how do you politely tell someone they're overweight? I didn't respond to this particular one. I don't think. Yeah, I didn't respond to this particular one. I do have have answers on this though in perspective. So the easy, quick answer is you don't. You don't tell someone they're overweight. There's like, what's the purpose? What's the thought process? Why do you feel the need to tell that person that they're overweight? Now, putting on my help me understand hat here, I'm going to try to stretch before I make this reach. And I hesitate for a second because I'm trying to come up with a scenario that I believe could be realistic for a decent amount of the folks listening to this podcast versus coming up with some sort of scenario that's so outlandish and would happen, once every 100 years or something like that. It's like less chance of it happening as like getting completely free tickets to every Taylor Swift concert that's ever existed on the face of the earth. Like, not going to happen, right? So let's say that you have a scenario where there is someone that you care about. It's a family member. Let's go family member that you care about, and you see them a handful of times throughout the year. And when you see them, you notice that they are progressively gaining weight to the point where they are having difficulty doing basic things like walking up a small flight of steps. They need to frequently take breaks and sit down. They have started reporting to you, or you've just become aware that they're experiencing, say, a little bit more knee pain than usual. And then also when you spend time with them that few times a year, you notice particular eating habits that aren't as health focused. You don't really notice like a decent amount of, let's say, nutrient dense foods and things like that. So if you were to be in a situation like that, and if this question were rephrased, so say if somebody said, how do you politely, let me start with the original, how do you politely tell someone they're overweight? Now it's easy with the rage, all of the rage bait type content to respond, well, you don't. That was my first answer. You don't tell them that they're overweight. It's none of your business, like that sort of a thing. Now, would I have the same energy if somebody came to me and said, I need help. I have someone who I care a lot about, somebody who I love, family member, close friend, somebody who means a lot to me. And I'm concerned because I have slowly but surely over the past few years, when I see them, I've noticed that their health is declining. And I believe that it's apparent that weight loss would be helpful to them. How do you politely tell someone that? So putting my help me understand hat here and coaching hat. So I got two hats on at the same time. I would start with asking questions of that person that you care about. So let's call them John. I just made that up. So if you're telling me that you've got some concerns about John and you want to politely ask them if they're okay, because I think there's a difference between you tell someone that they're overweight, that I don't know that the person doesn't know that they may be quote unquote overweight. That also is one of those things where overweight can be really subjective. It honestly can be subjective. However, I think if you're noticing health declining and those examples that I gave, a lot of shortness of breath, difficulty performing what seem to be simple tasks that you've seen them perform, you just notice an overall decline in performance, and you just had to figure out a way like, how can I open up this conversation? It would be as foundational as starting a conversation with some questions about like, hey, what have you been up to lately? And then kind of asking them, well, I had noticed that when we were at the grocery store the other day, you had asked if we could take a few more breaks because, your knee was hurting or whatnot. Any idea what's kind of going on there? So asking some questions to seek to understand where they are, like where they are in their head or actions that they've already taken with the particular issue that is presenting itself. I think there's a difference with asking questions to understand something that someone is presenting to you versus asking questions about something that has not been brought to your attention at all, that they have not, a behavior that you haven't seen done in front of you, like you've heard it from somebody else. Like somebody told me that, I was about to do the whole killers thing, but somebody told me, so-and-so had to leave work early, like the past 3 days, just because, they were in so much pain or, whatever it is. I see them in the break room all the time, just eating nothing but cheeseburgers. And so then you take it upon yourself like that. Nah, that's really none of your business. I do think though, let's keep it real here. If you are someone who has somebody that you care about and there are particular things that you are noticing that they have also either expressed some concern about or have expressed difficulty with performing those particular things, that is something where you can ask questions to see like, hey, where's your head at on this? Or is there anything in particular that you've been doing about that particular thing? And then going from there, like gauging from there. I think that maybe my answer to that is not necessarily what everybody else would think. And also, I will unapologetically admit and express that I have a bias when it comes to fitness and health. So even myself as a coach, like I'll pick up on particular things that I may see from friends and family members. And do I comment on all of them? No. In fact, probably not on most of them, because I also am understanding that just because a person is around me doesn't mean that that is an open door for me to make unsolicited comments and ask unsolicited questions about particular things. Now, when somebody expresses to me that, and I just use this example with the grocery store thing, I don't know why, but when somebody says like, hey man, we got to take a break for a second because my knee is hurting, then I will express that. I will take that as a little bit of it, or not a little bit. I will take that as an open door to ask a question, some sort of a follow-up. Oh, how long's that knee thing been going on? And even if I deem it to be something that is related to them carrying around more weight, which go back to something that I talked about earlier, is typically more of a lower ratio of muscle to body fat. So when we talk about like weight loss, is really the issue that they weigh too much, or is the issue that they're really under muscled and don't have the muscular structure to support the frame and the body that they have and the movements that they want to do? Like, is that more of the thing? That's why I'll try to open the door with questions that really are geared more towards that versus like, hey, I don't know how to tell you this, but the reason your knee hurts is because you're fat. Like that, nah, miss me with all that. So in this particular thread, again, I stopped like really scrolling through the comments on this particular one. It's just the overwhelming majority, it was like either you don't tell that person or they were clapbacks at the original poster. Like one of the comments was like, I don't know, how do you politely tell somebody that they're a jerk, or, other kind words. So yeah, there you go. All right. So with that is going to wrap up the 3 things from threads. So the threads 3 on questions that nobody asked me, comments that no one asked me to make, and still, I thought that they were some pretty decent things to riff on. So if you enjoyed today's episode, if you would like more episodes like this, probably I could easily see myself doing this once a week if it's something that hits with my audience, my perspective, my answer to questions that nobody actually asked me. Or if you actually do have a question, fitness and health and mindset related, those general areas, like that's usually where I like to hang my hat. If you have questions that you would like to submit, feel free to reach out. You can check out my info in the show notes. You can reach out to me via email. You can DM me on Instagram. Speaking of email, I've always got the link to join my email list in the show notes. I send out one free workout a week along with some different musings throughout the week. Very much reads kind of like a blog post, but at the very least, you get at least one free workout each week, along with some context with why I programmed that workout the way that I did and adjustments that you can make if you're short on time, if you don't have necessarily access to the specific equipment that's in the workout, like machines and different things like that. Check out joining my email list. I think you would actually dig some of that. So with that, thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Help Me Understand podcast. Take care, and I'll talk to you next time.